Hello everyone, my name is Stephen Redman. Welcome to Pastor's Library. This is the channel where we discuss everything to do with theology books. And today I've got a small series of fairly accessible paperbacks to talk about with you, which I've found helpful along the way. The man behind them is predominantly Tremper Longman III. Tremper Longman III is a theologian of great expertise. He's really an Old Testament theologian, although he did a very interesting commentary on the book of Revelation not that long ago. But his work has been well renowned in the wisdom books, and I think that this little series is something he's probably fitting them in between his other major projects, and it's starting to come to a sort of an age. The one I first picked up was How to Read Genesis in 2005. This is 192 pages. They're all called How to Read, and if you go to IVP Academic, their website, and search for How to Read, you'll get the long list. I've got all of those here today. So what I would say is that he may be a top-notch theologian, he may be a writer of very technical things from time to time, but these are very accessible. They really are. You can just sit down and muddle your way through them. But what I would say is, to say they're very accessible doesn't mean that they don't have some real star points in them. For example, this one, when I was reading the first section, Genesis 1, 2, 3 and so on, I was really taken up by his section on the consequences to the serpent in Genesis chapter 3. And he has some really interesting things to say about that. These books are styled the same way in all of them, that they have a selection of further reading advertised, and they also have an end section, commentaries on the book of Genesis. And that section is really recommending you things that go a bit deeper than what he's put in here. This is an introductory book on how to read Genesis. And fundamentally, the clue is in the title. This is not about the theology of Genesis. This is not a commentary on Genesis. This is how you should start reading and studying Genesis. And I think how you should study is always good advice, and he certainly gives that advice. So I think this is a good book, and you'll find lots of juicy bits in that book. Now, amazingly, I then bought How to Read Exodus, amazingly by the same Tremper Longman III. This was published in 2009. It's 187 pages. And it starts with a great section on study. And, isn't it enough just to read the book of Exodus? Why should we study it? And of course, that's helpful because it answers a question that maybe people ignore or sidestep, but it's an important question. Why should we study? And to what level should we study? So I found that helpful. Like the others, this has a section at the end of each chapter giving questions so that you can talk about it in a group or even with yourself and ask yourself the questions and work through it. I think all of these books are good for home group Bible studies. You could easily work through a chapter a week and then spend time answering the questions at the end. For example, in this one, he has a section on tabernacled amongst us. John 1:14, the word became flesh and tabernacled amongst us. The word became flesh and dwelt amongst us. Or as Peterson says in the Message, the word became flesh and moved into the neighbourhood. But this is, tabernacle is an Exodus word, and he deals with that. Again, I found this one really good, and I actually finished this book and had a real hankering for the new commentary that's coming out in the next few months by Carmen Imes on Exodus. I'm looking forward to getting that. How to Read Job is a co-write with John H. Walton, and both of them do a good job on this. I've got to be honest with you, Job's a book that I have studied a real lot, and I have very defined views about Job. And I sort of felt that this didn't, I suppose, agree with me, which sounds very bizarre, doesn't it? But I sort of thought that the two of them didn't quite manage all that could be drawn out, although there is a lot in here about punitive retribution, which is, to my mind, what the book's all about. Of the series that's out so far, I think this is the least good, but it's still a good way of conversing about Job, talking about it in a group. It's still a good way of learning together. So that was excellent. Now, the one that came out first actually was How to Read the Psalms, which came out in 1998. It's 166 pages. And this is a great introduction to the Psalms. It really is. It does things like talk about when is something poetry and the structure of poetry, the meter of the language, the imagery, metaphors, things like that. All subjects which are directly relevant to the Psalms. I think that this is actually a really good introduction. And of course, he is now really in his main expertise of the wisdom books. That's a good one. Now, the one which personally I think might be the best so far came out in 2002. It's 174 pages. How to Read Proverbs. Now, funnily enough, this has a little bit of a chapter that refers back to Job. And I actually think this is better on Job than the book on Job. That's a personal opinion. But he deals with wonderful things in this book, like the fear of the Lord and wisdom. And I have to say to you, from some of his other books, I think Tremper Longman on the fear of the Lord it's an amazing subject for him. He has such insight. He's really, really good. So if you're wanting to get into Proverbs, and let's face it, it can be a book that you need a bit of help to get into. But I think this is an absolutely excellent starter. And the sixth and last book that's out so far, I'm just waiting for Habakkuk and Zephaniah and all these others to come out. I think there's a long way to go yet. But 2020, 189 pages, How to Read Daniel. Now, I think this is a particularly helpful book. It leaves you with a sense of, I think I can understand it now. Because let's face it, Daniel is a book that can tax you a little bit. You've got sort of historical sections, you've got prophetic sections, and there's a great chapter, I think it's called Comfort in the Midst of Oppression, and I really got so much out of that. You've got adventures, you've got visions, and the same man is giving us direction on what they mean and when they mean. And of course, whether or not those are prophetic things that have yet to happen. I really think Tremper Longman has done brilliantly with this. So I suppose I just didn't really get on with Job as well as the other ones. But this is a really excellent book. And the Daniel one I thoroughly commend to you. The Proverbs one, I would have to say, if there was only one that I thought was outstanding, it would probably be that. But frankly, they're all pretty good. So that's a quick insight onto 6 accessible books. All got Tremper Longman III as their author. The Job one has also got John H. Walton in there. And these are all available, accessible, affordable, which is not true every pastor's library, is it? So thank you very much for joining in. Why don't you leave a comment? It'd be great to hear from you. I do try to get back to everybody. And until next time, folks, all I've got to say to you is bye! you.